Okay, today we're going to do section 5.4, dividing decimals. So if you remember, when we divide, we have our divisor out front here, we have the dividend in here, the quotient is up here, and our remainder is whatever's left over at the bottom. Now what we're going to eventually want to do is, we're going to want to get a remainder of 0, and so that's going to be how this is going to work. So to divide a decimal by a whole number, but we set up a long division as you normally do whole numbers, kind of like we showed above. We're going to place a decimal point in the quotient area directly above the decimal and the dividend. We'll show you that here in a little bit. And then we're going to perform the long division as if the both divisor and the dividend are whole numbers, and we're going to forget about the decimals if they're shown anywhere. Then we're going to add zeros to the right of the decimal point as needed to complete the division one at a time until there is no remainder. So we're going to basically keep going until we don't get a remainder. So let's look at some examples. And we're going to start with two whole numbers. So we're going to take 52 into 39. Now that's 39 point because that's where the decimal is it's right there. And so we're going to put our decimal up there and put that like that. And now we have 52 into 39. Well, that goes 0 times. And then now we have to start adding a 0. So if we add 1 0, now we have to think, how many times does 52 go into 390? Well, I don't know, so let's multiply out here. Let's try 52 times, let's see, 7 times 5 is 35, so let's try 7 first. So that's 14, that's 35, 36, and another 50 is going to be over that, so let's start with 7 here. So that's going to be 364. I'm going to subtract that. Now, this is kind of when we start ignoring the decimal. We're just thinking of these as whole numbers. We've taken care of the decimal by putting it there. So we go, and that's going to become an 8. Here we have 10, so 10 minus 4 is 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. Now we have to add another decimal because we don't have, 0. We have a remainder of 26. Now, how many times does 52 go into 260? Well, I think 25 would be if we multiply by 5. So it's 5 times that's 10. That's 25, 26. So that's going to be a 5. That's going to give us 260. Subtract, that's 0. So our answer to this is 0.75. All right. Now with this one, we do the same thing, except we have our decimal already in place and one decimal place beyond it. Whereas this one, there was no decimal shown. We put it in and then we started adding zeros automatically. So this is going to be 410.4, and we put our decimal there. So now we think about how many times does 76 go into 410? Well, 76 times 5 is going to give us a 35, so that's close to 41. So let's start there. So 6 times 5 is 30. That's 35, 36, 37, 38. And so let's try that one. So that's going to be 5. So that's going to give us 380. Now we subtract, that's 3. So we have 0 minus 0 is 0. 11 minus 8 is 3. And now we bring down our 4. Okay, and then we subtracted that to do that. So now how many times does 76 go into 304? Well, I think 4 times 8 is 28, so maybe we'll start there. 6 times 4 is 24. That's 28, 29, 30. Oh, there we go, 4. So that's going to give us 304. We subtract, we have a remainder of 0, so that means we're done. And so it gives us 5.4. Okay, so that's how we work with the decimals when either they're not one here, so we just add the decimal and put it above, or if it's already there, we just bring it up above and put it there, and then we can do our division. Now, what if we divide a decimal by a decimal? Well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to move the decimal to the end of the divisor. Remember, that's the denominator, prior to writing in long division format. But whatever we do in the denominator, then we have to move the decimal in the dividend or the numerator the same number of places. So if we have to move it, say 2 places, say this was 0.76 and we had to move it 2 places to the right, we'd have to move it 2 places in the numerator as well. Then we put it into the long division format and divide as if dividing a decimal by a whole number, because that's what we're doing now. And remember, whenever we're doing division, it's going to be kind of like multiplication. A positive divided by positive is positive. A negative divided by negative is positive. Negative divided by a positive is negative, and a positive divided by negative is a negative. And as we do with everything, we're going to use PEMDAS if we have anything that has a lot of different things to work with, powers, exponents, parentheses, etc. All right, so this is going to be our first one where we have a decimal divided by a decimal. And as we see, if we want to get this to be a whole number, we have to move this 2 places to the right. Well, if we move the denominator 2 places, we have to move the numerator 2 places. So this now is 47 into 34.78. And now we just put our decimal up there. And now we can divide like we did before. We take 47 into 34. Well, guess what? That's a 0. Now 47 into 347, well, 4 times what is going to give us 34? Well, if we do 4 times 8, that'll be 32, but I think that's going to give us bigger. So let's try 47 times, let's try 7, because I think the 8 is going to be too big, because 8 times 7 is going to be a big number, and when we add it, it's going to cancel. So 7 times 7 is 49, and 4 times 7 is 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Okay, well, that's less than 347, and so I think that's what we'll use. So that's going to be 329. Now we subtract, that's going to be 3. So now we have 9 and 17. So that's going to give us an 8. And then we have 3 minus 2 is 1. And then we kind of bring down our 8. We subtracted there. So 4 times 4 will give us 16. So let's take 47 times 4. That's going to give us 28. That's 16, 17, 18. So 4 is going to give us 188. Subtract, that's 0. And so our answer is 0.74. Okay. All right. That one we had to move twice. This one, we only have 1 decimal, so we just have to move this one once. And so we have to move it once up here. And so what we have is 18 into 10.08. Then we put our decimal up here. Well, 18 doesn't go into 10, so that's a 0. So 18 goes into 100. Well, 18 times, let's say 5 might be close. That's going to give us 40. That's going to give us a 9. If we do another 18, that's going to be over, so 5 should be a good number. And so it's going to be 90. Subtract, that's going to give us 10. Bring down our 8. And now I think this is when we can use our 6. 18 times 6, that's going to be 48. And 6 and 4 is 10. So that's going to give us a 6. And then we have 108. Subtract that off, that's 0. So then this is going to be 0.56. All right. So that's how we have to do it when we have decimals we're dividing by. And so then when we divide by it, we end up moving it over until we get a whole number here and a whole number here. Then we're taking a whole number into some decimal, and that's just like we did at the very beginning. All right, so here's some more, and now we have some signs to include, and we have to have some decimals in the denominator. So working on this first one first, we're going to move it 1 here and 1 here. So what that gives us is 16 into 110.4. Put our decimal up there so we don't forget about it. Now, 16 will go into 11 0 times, but into 110, well, I don't know. Let's try 16 times 7. So that's going to be 42. So that's going to be 11. That's too big. So 16 times 6. That's 36. That's going to give us 96. So that'll work. So we have a 6 here and then 96. And subtract that off. And so if we take and borrow 1 here, that's 0. Borrow 1 here, that's 10. So 10 minus 6 is 4. 10 minus 9 is 1. And we have a 4. All right, so we know it's going to be bigger than 7. And now if we think about things times 6, that'll give us a 4. If we take 16 times 9, that'll give us a 4, because that's going to be 54. And then 9 and 5, that's going to be 14. And so we have 6.9, so give us 144. Subtract that, that's 0. So that gives us a negative 6.9 because we had that negative out front. We have to remember that's a negative still. Okay. All right, so now let's move to the next one. Now we're taking a negative divided by a negative. Well, remember that just becomes positive. And so now all we have is a decimal into a decimal. So to get rid of the decimal in the denominator, we have to move it over 2 spaces. So we do the same thing in the numerator. So what we have is 75 into 202.5. Put our decimal up there. Now, 7 times 3 is going to give us 21, so that's big, too big. So 75 times 2, that's going to give us 10, 14, 15. So let's try that one. So that's going to give us 150. Subtract there. So 2 minus 0 is 2. Here we have to borrow 1. So 10 minus 5 is 5. That's less than 75, so that's fine. Now we'd bring down our 5. 7 times 9 is going to be too big. 7 times 8, 56 is too big. 7 times 7, that might work. So 75 times 7, that's going to give us 35. That's 49, 50, 51, 52. Oh, that's what we want. So it's going to be a 7. So that's 525. Subtract 0. And so 2.7 then is going to be our answer. And again, it's going to be positive because we took a negative divided by negative, which makes it positive. All right, so here we're going to have powers of 10 again. So when we multiplied by powers of 10, we move the decimal place to the right. Now when we divide by a power of 10, we're going to move the decimal in places to the left. So now we're going to be moving to the left. So with this one, we have a power of 2. So we have n equals 2, so we're going to move left 2 spaces, basically. And so if we go ahead and write that down here, 849.39, we're going to take this and move it 2 places to the left. So 1, 2. So now we have 8.4939. That will then be our answer when we divide by 10 to the negative 2. Now here it's 10 to the third. So if we have n is equal to 3, we're going to move 3 spaces to the left. So if we have 884.15, we move 1, 2, 3. So that's our spot now. So we have 0.88415. And that would be what we get when we divide by 10 to the positive 3. So again, we just move whatever direction. If we multiply, we move to the right, the number of spaces n is. If we divide by 10 to the n, we move n spaces to the left. So that's how we are working with the powers of 10. Makes it really simple. We don't have to really do any division or anything. We just have to move spaces. All right, so this one, what we're going to do is we have to basically do our division, 43 divided by 82, and then all we're going to do is take it out so many spaces as far as the quotient goes, and what we have is we're going to have to round because this is not going to actually terminate, and so it just keeps going and going and going, and so we just have to round to whatever we need to do here, and so we have to do a 10th rounding and a 100th rounding. So we have to go to at least to the thousandth place to be able to get to around to the 100th. And so we have to take it out a few places. So 82 into 43. And we know we have to go out to at least the thousandth. So that's 10th, 100th, thousandth. And so we know we're going at least that far. All right, well, 82 goes into here 0 times. Now, 8 times 5 will give us 40. So let's try 82 times 5. So that's going to be 10. That's going to be 41. So that'll work. So we have a 5. So it's going to be 410. Subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. 3 minus 1 is 2. And so now we bring down a 0. Well, 82 times 2, that'll be 4, that'll be 16, so that'll give us less than that, so that works. So we have a 2. That's 164. Now we subtract, so that's 1, that's 9. So 10 minus 4 is 6, 9 minus 6 is 3, and now we bring down the next 0. So 360. Okay, well, now we have to be less than 5, so it looks like we're going to have to take 82 times 4, so that's going to give us 8, and that's going to give us 32, so that's an 4. Whoa. That's going to give us 4. And so that's going to be 328. So we have to borrow here. So 10 minus 8 is 2. 5 minus 2 is 3. That's going to be a 0. But we already have far enough to round to the 10th and 100th. If we had to go to the 1,000th or 10,000th or 100,000th, we'd have to just keep going and going and going until we could get to the point where we round. But here we have 0.524. So first, let's say this one is A and this one is B. So A, we need to round to the nearest 10th, which is here. So this is our rounding digit in that case. 2 is less than 5, so then we don't round this. So that's just going to be 0.5 rounded to the nearest 10th. Now B, well, now we have 0.524, so we're going to round to this 100th, and so that's our rounding digit. 4, that also is not greater than or equal to 5, so we don't round this, and so that's going to be 0.52. So rounded to the nearest 10th, it's 0.5. Rounded to the nearest 100th, it's 0.52. Okay, and again, if we needed to have more, we would just have to go further out on our long division to get those spaces that we would need to be able to round to whatever position they asked for. All right, so this one is PEMDAS. We have to follow orders of operations. So what it looks like is we're going to have to multiply those two together first. So that's going to be first. And then after that, we're going to take and add or subtract basically those two. So that's going to be second. And then at the end, we'll take and divide, and that would be third. So we've got a few things to work on. Now, if we look at this, minus a negative 18.6, well, we can already change that to make it a plus 18.6. So we have an addition instead of a subtraction. So that maybe will make it easier with less negative signs there. So first, let's take and multiply that. 1.5 times 8.8. All right, so we'll take 5 times 8 is 40. 8 plus 4 is 12. Well, and guess what? It's going to be the same thing here. 0, 2, 1. So now we add them together. That's 0, 2, 3, 1. And we moved it 1, 2 spaces. So we have to move it 2 spaces here. So 13.2 is going to be our answer, but it's negative. So it's a negative 13.20 plus 18.6. And we can drop that 0 if we wanted to, or we could add a 0 here. It all really doesn't matter. So now what we have is this. And that's all still divided by the 1.8. Now 18.60 is larger than 13.20. So what we can do is we can just do a subtraction. We can take 18.6, and if we drop the 0, we can do that. 13.2. And so we bring down our decimal. So 6 minus 2 is 4. 8 minus 3 is 5. And that's what we're left with. And so that just becomes 5.4 divided by 1.8. Okay, now we've simplified the first two steps. So now what we need to do is we need to move our decimal one spot here to make it a whole number in the bottom. And whatever we do in the bottom, we have to do in the top. So we're just taking 18 into 54. So we need to take 18 times something. Well, if we take 18 times, I don't know, 3, that will give us a 4 here. So that's going to be 24. And then 3 plus 2 is 5. So there we go, 54. So 3, and that's 54. When we subtract that, that's 0. So our overall answer is just 3. Okay, so it looks pretty nasty with all those decimals and everything above there, but it turns out to be a nice, simple, easy answer of 3. We don't even have a decimal place in it. All right, we have an application problem here. So it says Rory bought 4 cartons of milk. each carton having 2 gallons. He paid a total of $28.50 to buy the milk. How much did a gallon of milk cost Rory? Okay, well, let's think about this. We have 4 cartons of milk he bought, and each carton had 2 gallons. Well, that means he's going to have 4 times 2, which is going to be 8 gallons of milk. So because he has to take 4 times a 2. Now he paid $28.50 to buy the milk. So how much did a gallon of milk cost? Well, now we're going to take 28.50 divided by the number of total gallons, and that will give us how much it costs per 1 gallon. So now we just take 8 into 28.50, put our decimal up there so we don't forget. Well, 8 times 3 is going to give us 24. Subtract that, that's a 4. Bring down our 5. Well, 8 times 5 is 40. Subtract that off, so that's 5. And then bring down our 0 again. 8 times what is going to give us 50? Well, 8 times 6 is 48. So that will give us that. So if we subtract there, that's going to be 2. Now we add a 0, so we bring that down. And so 8 times 2 will be 16. And subtract that off, so that's going to give us a 4. Add another 0, bring that down. And so 8 times 5, that will give us 40. Subtract that, we get 0. So now we get 3.5625. But, when we look at prices, we only go to that cents. So that means we need to round to the hundredth. And so this is what we want to round to. This is our rounding digit. 2 is less than or equal to 5. And so we don't round that up. So it's going to be equal to 3.56 per gallon of milk. And so that's how much it costs to get to that gallon of milk. Okay, so that's all I have for the regular lecture, and I'll make some more lectures with different things for some extra examples.